Hi there. Welcome to Drop the Mask. I'm Christy. What if everything you've been told about who you should be isn't truly who you are? Today I have Sherrie Allsup, my beautiful friend from Texas, who is going to share her experience. I hate using stories because those are like fairy tales, and fairy tales really don't exist. But our experiences help others understand that they're safe and their experience is going to help somebody else down the line. It's called being transparent and knowing that everything that we go through is going to make us a better person, even when it's really, really shitty. Um, really shitty. So when we're children, we put on a mask. We don't know who we are. So it's like, oh, I like that girl. I'm going to be like that person. And oh, I like who that person is on TV. And so we start putting those masks on. And whether the older we get, whether it's with our family, relationships, business, and then we start getting a little heavy because we don't know who we are. And then the older we get, we start saying, we read the self help books and, I want to love myself. But we've got all those masks on us. And so for me, it took me into my 40s to finally go raw. And I'm learning that sometimes I still need to put a little bit of a veil of a mask on. And that's a little hard for me because I don't believe in masks. What you see is what you get with me. But you got to sometimes do that. So I want to have Sherrie share her story. Wow, it's an amazing story, but it's not good for what she went through. But when we go through really hard times, we have that choice to decide: Am I going to stay in this darkness, or am I going to be able to be light for somebody else? So, Sherrie, thank you.
Sure. I'm so glad to be here with you today. And I love the title that you picked because
Oh,
I wore a mask for a long, long time. For years, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know. I All I knew to be were the labels that other people put on me. I was fat, stupid, dumb, worthless, ignorant. I would never amount to anything. And that's what I believed because that's what I was always told. And when you hear that over and over, that becomes just ingrained in who you are. And so I had no expectations of myself because I know who I am. I'm fat, stupid, dumb, and worthless, and I won't ever amount to anything. Um, it's really hard to claw your way as an adult out of all those labels that you've worn your whole life and to believe that maybe I can be something. Maybe I'm not worthless and maybe there is a place for me in life, whatever that looks like. So I'm so captivated by what you're doing, and thank you for doing that.
well, we both have battled depression. We both
Yes.
have seen the darkness, but through our conversations, we clicked because we could see each other's side of what we neither one of us had experienced what the other person did, but we understand empathy and compassion for human beings, and also understanding society wants us to stay where they want us to stay.
Oh my gosh, and family wants you to stay where you're at because that's what they know. And if I change, it's like throwing a pebble into a pond. The first splash is me, and then all those ripples, people around your life, they have to change too. And people really aren't real keen on changing.
No,
And they certainly don't want you to change because this is the way it's always been. This is the way you've always done it. And why would you do that? You've never done that. Um, what makes you so what makes you think you're all that now? I don't. I'm just not who I've been told that I was for my whole life. And if
so,
if we could do
so
that when we're
sure.
20, it'd be
Right.
fabulous. But for me, it was 50, so it takes a long time.
Mine's 60. I mean, my 40s and 50s, I was still trying to figure out and seeing, my whole thing was looking outside of myself for the affirmations. And when we get to that place where we're grounded, it's sort of still scary where you're going, holy shit, I am somebody. To
And
me,
other people see that before we do. And
exactly.
so as they're trying to tell us that, we're busy saying, or at least I was busy saying, don't, that's not true. I'm not smart. I don't have anything to contribute. I'm not someone who people want to hear speak. I'm none of those things. And instead of being able to accept that and say, thank you so much, that
Yeah,
means the world to me. And I'm getting there. I'm still a, if somebody says, I like your shirt, and you say, oh my gosh, this whole thing, I just picked it up at the thrift shop, instead of just saying thank you.
right.
And that is so hard, but we're getting there. We're a work in progress still, but we're getting there
We are a work in progress. It's
every day.
sometimes it's hard work, but we can look back at the work that we did and go, holy crap. So share your story of where, what, and how, and be as raw
Um,
as you want, because your darkness has light is always at the end of the tunnel.
it is. It's a long, hard road, and it's a hard road, and you have to be willing to work it, but it's there. And not everybody has the tenacity, I guess, to put the work in. And there are other options of coping that some people use that are easier, but don't have a very good outcome. So for me, my story starts when I'm 6 or 7, and my parents were married. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. I have a sister 2 years younger than me and a brother that's 9 years younger than me. And my father was a horribly abusive man, um, physically, mentally, verbally, sexually, emotionally, everything there was, that was him. Now, the community, if you ask the community about my dad, they would tell you that my dad was a really great guy, because most perpetrators are really great guys. Um, Society likes to believe that a sexual perpetrator rolls up in a white van and rolls the window down and says, hey, little girl, do you want some candy? But that's not the truth. We know them. We know our perpetrators. They're in our homes, our schools, our little leagues, our churches, our Girl Scouts. They're hiding in plain sight. So my father was my perpetrator, and my sexual abuse, my incest, started when I was 6 or 7. My first memory is full penetration. Normally there's a grooming period, but that's gone from my brain. May or may not come back, I don't know. So from an early age, my father told me who I was. A perpetrator's really good at keeping their victims quiet, tiny, and holding on to their secret. And they're good at manipulation and coercion, because that's how they do that. So for me, my father would tell me every day who I was. On this side of my brain, I knew who I was: dumb, stupid, fat, ugly, worthless. And the only way I could ever hope to make a living was to be really good at a blowjob, because that's how I could make a living. So I knew that. I knew who I was. And on the other side of my brain, I have him telling me what's going to happen if I tell someone. My mom will cry, and that would be my fault. My parents would get a divorce, and that would be my fault. My siblings and I would be separated and put into foster homes, and that would be my fault. My father would go to jail, and that would be my fault. We'd all go hungry, and that would be my fault. Every single thing that would be a consequence of my father's actions was my fault. And I was 6 and 7 and 8, and I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. I have a sister that's 2 years younger than me. So people often ask me, why didn't I tell someone? Which is a really not a good question to ask someone. So, I encourage people to don't ever do that. Um, we don't talk about sexual assault now. I grew up in the 70s. We dang sure weren't talking about it then. But I have a sister 2 years younger than me, and it's my job, my self appointed job, to protect my sister. And so that's what I did. Life was very difficult. There were emotional outbursts. There were beatings. There were um, uh, mental abuse, just the whole gamut of abuse. And so nights and weekends, Well, let me back up. My father drilled oil in Alaska for a job. In the summertime, you cannot drill. You can only drill in the wintertime. So he was home in the summertime. So the worst day of my life every year was the last day of school because I knew my father was going to be home all summer long. So, and my mother worked. We moved a lot. I probably moved 10 or 12 times. The last time I moved, I was in the 8th grade. So I never had a chance to make um, trusting relationships with a friend's mom or a Sunday school teacher or a classroom teacher. So when people flippantly ask, and I don't think they do it with malice, what all you had to do was tell someone. Why didn't you tell someone? And then what?
Right.
So so I did the best I could. My grades were horrible. I did very poorly in school. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't learn. I just did awful. And then when I got into high school, I started running away. Law enforcement would always find me. They were very kind to me, but they would always take me back home. They would see my dad on the porch waiting for me. Um, they would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, Sherrie, there's your dad. He's a great guy. Tell him I said hi." And I said, "Okay." And so that would ensue in a horrific beating when I went back home again. And so I was stuck in this cycle of the sexual abuse and running away and being returned and then a beating. And it was just this hamster wheel that I stayed on. Um, when I was a senior in high school, I got married, didn't know any better, didn't know, was so broken, so very broken. Had 3 children. My oldest son was born. I graduated high school in May, and he was born in August. And I couldn't have been any more broken. But I tried to be the best mom that I could be because I wanted my kids to be everything and have everything that I wasn't. But there was no Sherrie. If it was my turn to be the PTA mom, I could go to my closet and find the PTA mask and put that on, and I can be the PTA mom. If it's my day to be the little league mom who takes the treats, I can put that on. If it's my day to teach Sunday school, just tell me who you need me to be
Right.
because I got this. I'm an Academy
Got that
Award winning
mask.
actress.
I got a closet full of
I
masks.
do. I can be whoever you want me to be. I got this. And that's how I lived my life. And there was no Sherrie except whoever I needed to be for that day. And that's how I got through each and every day. And then when I was, 45, 40, well, actually, when I was 35, I went and had lunch with a friend. And out of the blue, she said, "Sherrie, I know about your dad." Now, to this day, I don't know how she knew, but we talked about it and we cried. And then we made a promise that we'd never talk about it again. No one knew about my abuse. And at this time, I was 35. No one, not my children's father, no one. And I thought I was okay when I left that day, except that the pieces wouldn't go back in the box anymore and in the back of my head, and the lid wouldn't close. And I started spinning out of control. And I knew I was going to have to get in therapy really quick if I was going to survive it. But I wanted to talk to my sister. So,
Had you gone to any therapy during?
no,
Is that
nobody knew.
we don't because
No.
you'd have to open up that box.
Yeah. What would I tell people? People
Yeah.
think I live a charmed life.
Right.
Um, so together, my sister and I called my mom, and my mom confronted my father, and he said it was true. Everything she's saying is true. And my mom left him, and I was elated because my children didn't have much of a relationship with my mom. I wouldn't allow them to go there. Um, and I was so excited because now is my chance. He's going to be gone, so it's my chance to have a relationship with my mom. And she called me the next day and she said, "I just want to tell you that I talked to your dad and he said he's sorry and I'm going home." And she went back and they stayed married until he died probably 10 years ago. So I got into therapy. worked really hard, tried to unravel this mess that I had been left with, couldn't find me, didn't know how to, I mean, I had perfected the perfect smile. And if
You
you
didn't know
ask me
who you
how I
were.
am, I can
Right.
say, I'm fine, thank you. How are you? And what I learned about people was that if you'll say something, if you'll ask something about them or their kids, they forget to ask anything about you. They're very, and I don't mean that to be rude, but people are very happy to talk about themselves and their children. And when you turn the conversation like that, then they don't ask you any questions. And so that's how I manipulated people and life and conversations. And so my marriage did not withstand, um, my marriage to my children's father did not withstand the fallout from crying out about my abuse and the therapy and all of that went with it, and it didn't survive it. So I was alone by myself for the first time ever in my life. I was 40 years old, and I stayed in therapy, and I was determined to get better. And a few years later, I met a guy, had no intentions of ever being dependent on anyone, of ever relying on anyone, of ever needing anyone. I was going to do it myself. And if I didn't let anyone in, then I would never, ever be hurt. So
Right.
just let me go to work every day and do the best I can do by my kids. And then the rest of it doesn't matter. So I stayed in therapy, accidentally met this guy. He wanted to take me to lunch or dinner. And so I finally said, I will go, but I have to tell you something. And so I vomited 40 some years of information. And I knew that he was going to say, about that dinner, let's not.
That's why we're so alike. I vomit the stuff
Yeah,
instead
I
of
just,
like,
bleh. And he said, I'd still like to take you to dinner. And I thought, there's something seriously wrong with you. But I ended up marrying that man about 8 months later, and that was 23 years ago. But we had just been married. And one morning he said to me, I'm going to make you breakfast. How do you like your eggs? And I said, how do you like yours? And he said, I, I just want to know how you like your eggs so I can make you breakfast. And I said, I would love that. How do you like yours? And if anybody knows anything about trauma, that's a 1000% typical trauma response. And he looked at me, and he was across the room from me, and he looked at me and he said, I like mine scrambled, but but how do you like yours? And I sat down in the living room floor and I started to cry. And I said, I don't know. No one's ever asked me. I don't know how I like my eggs. And that was the beginning of realizing that I only ate eggs how someone gave them to me. I don't pick those things. They're just, I just do as I'm told, and I eat what's I'm told. Um, and I remember the first time that I heard my real laughter and not the manufactured laughter. And it was so surprising to me that I stopped what I was doing and I looked around and I said, what's that sound? And the people I was with said, what sound? And I said, what was that? And it was the sound of my real laughter. And I'd never heard it. I didn't recognize it. So I have been married to this really great guy. Life was good. He learned all about my complex PTSD. He learned about how it cycles and all the crazy Sherrie things. And then in 2011, I lived in Kansas City at the time. In 2011, he got a job offer in Corpus Christi, Texas. Now I've been in talk therapy for years and years. I agreed to move to Corpus Christi, Texas for 1 year. And the job that Gary, that's my husband, the job that he took, he was absolutely thriving at. Now, my career had been spent in the medical field, and I couldn't get a job for love or money in Corpus because I wasn't bilingual. And the change of moving, leaving my home, leaving my children who were grown, my job, my friends, my dog, my house, everything that I knew and everything that was safe, and moving to Corpus was more than my broken brain could handle. And I didn't want to talk to Gary because he was doing very well in the job that he had taken, and he was loving it, and he's very good at it. And I wasn't mad or sad. I just was really tired. And I was tired of clawing and scratching every day to survive. And I just decided that there were things worse than dying. And living for me at the age 50 was worse than dying. So, unbeknownst to Gary, I bought a cemetery plot and I wrote down the I wrote the obituary and how I wanted the funeral to go, and what I wanted to wear. I knew that Gary would leave for work at 7:45 and he'd be back home at 12:15. I knew to be on my kitchen floor because I didn't want to leave a mess, and I didn't want to be on carpet. I wanted to be on tile. And I was just tired and done. And I often have people ask me, "Didn't you think of your husband?" Well, of course I did. And I believed with everything in me,
Yeah.
because you're not, if when you're attempting suicide, you're not thinking with your right brain. Because if you were thinking with your right brain, you wouldn't be in your kitchen floor trying to kill yourself.
Correct.
What I believed was that he would be sad for a moment, but then, and it was the but then that was the driving force. But then he could find someone who loves the way that he loves, and he would not be stuck with me and my 50 shades of crazy, and he could be happy, because I was convinced that he wasn't. People ask me, did I think of my kids? I did, but Satan that day would have loved nothing more than to take me out. And so my kids became very blurry and I couldn't see them very well. And my kids and I are very close, very close. And as I look back now, I don't know. I don't know how my kids would have survived that, and I don't know how Gary would have survived that. And God took that day in my life and started me on a new path. And when I finally had the courage to tell Gary, and he was disappointed that he had missed it, but listen, I'm an actress. I can play the game.
Right.
And so I started in a new kind of therapy, and I started EMDR, and it was very, very successful for
Now
me.
explain that kind of therapy to people that
It,
don't know it.
it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's very hard to explain because it's a lot like chicken voodoo or something. It's crazy. They put things in your hands and things on your ears, and for me, they put sandbags on my feet. People who have lived the life and the childhood that I lived, we're always on our toes because we're ready to run at any
Right.
moment. So they were trying very hard to get my feet to be flat on the ground. And they take a memory or a trauma that you can't work through, and then they begin to reprocess it and they move it from one side of your brain to the other so that you're not hung up on it. That's a really poor explanation of EMDR. I would recommend EMDR for anyone. It truly saved my life, changed my life, and saved my life. And I began to take my power back after all this time.
Well, at
Um,
6 years old, you didn't know that you had power.
no, and all through my adulthood, I didn't, because I'm
No.
carrying the weight of this secret, and I'm supposed to be fine and everything is fine, but it's not. EMDR is the hardest work I've ever done. It was exhausting, and I did it for several months. At the time, I live in Corpus Christi, Texas, and there was no one here, so I had to drive to San Antonio, which is 2 hours each way.
Right.
So Gary would drive me, and we would do, instead of doing a 1 hour session because I was driving so far, we'd do a 2 and 3 hour session. And then he would put me in the car and bring me back. He would wait in the parking lot, and I would sleep all the way back, and then he'd put me in bed and I would sleep until the next day. It was the most exhausting thing I've ever done, but it changed my life. And then I did a what's called a cardboard testimony at my church. So on the front of it, you write who you were, and on the back of it, you write who you are now. And I was asked to do it, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. Nobody publicly knew about my past. I couldn't say the word incest without wanting to throw up. But on my cardboard testimony, I wrote incest victim and suicidal. But when you turned it around, and I still have that.
Good.
That was in 2011. No, 2012. And when you turn it around, it says surviving thriver, I think is what it says on the back. And I have, someone snapped a picture that day of me in church, and I have the picture, and it's not a picture I share because it's doesn't even look like me. But from that, a couple of people asked me to come and help to talk to their group about sexual abuse. And I thought that was crazy because I'm a nobody. I'm worthless and stupid and dumb, and I got nothing to offer. And by about the third time, my brilliant businessman husband said, Sherrie, this is going to get bigger than you. And
that tends to scare you when you hear that. Like,
well, I thought he was crazy.
Yeah.
And he said, let's set this up right. And I want you to be the CEO and founder of your own nonprofit. And I said, you must have forgot that I'm stupid, dumb, and worthless and fat, and I can't do that. And he said, you maybe can't, but I can help you, and together we can. And so we established a nonprofit that I'm the CEO and founder of, which just sounds crazy. And I started getting invitations to speak at colleges and Christian women's groups, and lots of little places that I never expected. And then I was at a college about 8 years ago in Georgia, speaking at a college, and I was up on the stage, and down at the bottom of the stage, I could see a law enforcement officer standing down there. And so there's always a line of students that want to talk to me because the statistics for sexual abuse are 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. So they always want to tell me their story, and because I validate them. And so as I worked my way through this line of college students, I could see this law enforcement officer standing down there, and I began to realize that he was waiting for me. So when I got all done with the students, I went down there and introduced myself, and he was the chief of police. And he said, do you have a minute? I'd like to talk to you. And everything in me wanted to say, no, I do not have a minute. And I said, okay, what's up? And he said, do you mind coming to my office? And suddenly I was 6 again, and I wanted to pee down my leg. And so I did, went to his office, and he said, you said some things that I've never heard, and some things that they certainly don't teach us in the academy. He was a very seasoned chief of police. He's retired now. And he said, will you teach my officers everything you know? And I said, absolutely not. I don't know anything. No. And so, one of the things he asked me was, he said, you don't make eye contact. And I said, you're right, I don't. And he said, they teach us in the academy that if somebody doesn't make eye contact, they're lying. And I said, yeah, but what they're not teaching you is trauma.
Right.
And that's a trauma response, because we're filled with guilt, shame, and humiliation, and we suck at making eye contact. And I work on it every single day, every day. And I still am not anywhere near where I would like to be. So he and I built a class, and I taught his officers, and then went back in 6 months and taught, and he was in Georgia, in Atlanta, taught the officers at his college, or excuse me, at the time he was in Swainsboro, Georgia. And then the little colleges in the towns beside him, and started doing conferences and things. He retired a couple of years ago, maybe it's been 3, and stopped working with me. And I wasn't sure, I guess it's been 2, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. That was in December, and in February, I was invited to go on this little podcast called the Suffering Podcast.
Just a little
Little one.
podcast. Just a little one.
And I laugh and tell people in my phone to this day, it says Kevin, and then in quotes it says the Suffering Podcast, because he would call me before the podcast and we'd work on details. And I thought I'll never see him again. But when I walked into the studio that day and I met Kevin and I met Mike, and I knew that they were forever in my life, that I didn't know how, but I knew they were going to be forever in my life. And had a great time with them. Went back about a month later for Kevin's book launch. And I don't have a partner, and law enforcement is my love, because I can see the light bulbs going off over their heads. And I've had law enforcement officers say to me, every law enforcement officer in the U.S. needs to set under you, Sherrie, every one of them. Or they'll say, you're making me think back on every sex crime case I worked and how badly I screwed that up, because I didn't know what I didn't know. Because,
and it's very tough when you're a victim. I mean, I was raped, and I remember when I went finally to go to the police, I felt like I asked for it, but
and
they didn't know
you're
what to say to me.
interrogated
Yeah,
like a person who's committed a crime,
right,
because they don't understand trauma.
right.
So I come at it from a victim's point of view, and I eventually graduated myself to where I was teaching 8-hour classes, because I couldn't tell them what I needed them to know in 4 hours, which sounds crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't have a partner in 24, because my partner has quit. And Gary, my husband, said, Kevin would make a really good partner for you. And I thought, probably, but I'm like, Kevin's really busy. He's got a job, and he's got a podcast, and he's got a family. And he said, it's just a suggestion. So I talked to Kevin, and he said, I would love that. So last year Kevin and I formed a new partnership, and we teach only 8-hour classes now. And working with him is so powerful, because he's so dynamic. He pushes me to be a better version of myself, because he's so good at what he does. His skill is crafted so well, or his craft is skilled so well. And I'm loving every minute of it. And we have some great gigs coming up, and we've been invited to some great places, and I'm so honored. I do some other things besides law enforcement, like mental health conferences and low-income housing, some of those kind of things. But law enforcement that's my love, and that's where my heart is.
Didn't you recently, because, we look at law enforcement in a city and, in a town or whatever, but you all visited an Indian reservation, which is a completely different, it's a different animal of living. And
that was my second or third time there. It's Parker, Arizona, and it's the Regional Colorado River tribe. I can't think what it is. The law enforcement there that work those areas, that area is so underserved by law enforcement. I had a table when I was there, when Kevin and I were there in August. I had a table that had 5 guys at it, and I said something to one of them, and they said, we should have 40 guys on our staff, and we have 5, and they're all here. I said, who's running the station?
Right.
And one of them had an earpiece on, and he said, I am. And they all drive from over an hour just to get, they can't find law enforcement. But I love going there and I love working with them. I have not met anyone who has a heart for their job like they do, and all the odds are stacked against them. Sexual assault on tribal land is 10 times the national average. So the national average is 1 in 4 women, but on tribal land, it's 10 times that. And Kevin and I have tried to do the math, and I don't even know what the math is. It's absolutely horrifying. So I love going there. A couple of years ago, I was speaking at the National Sheriff's Conference in Washington, D.C. And when I got done, I had just stepped out the door of my conference room, and a guy came walking through the door, and he said, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay. And he said,
Does that still trigger you? Does that
yes.
still trigger you when, especially when a man comes up and says, I need to talk to you?
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What? And immediately I'm thinking, what did I say? They're going to challenge me on something. What did I do wrong?
Right.
And he said, I'm the sheriff for, now I'd never worked in a sheriff's office. I'd only done PDs. He said, I'm the sheriff for Lafourche Parish in Louisiana. What do I have to do to get you to come educate my law enforcement officers? And I said, just ask me. And he said, I'm going to tell you something. I've been a sheriff for a long time, and he has, and I love him dearly. His name's Sheriff Craig Weber. And I've been to more conferences than I would care to tell you. I've never sat under anybody like you, ever. And I want you to come and train my officers, and I want them to be the best that they can be. That's in Thibodaux, Louisiana. This year, I'm going back, which I think will be my 4th time to go back. And they keep casting a wider net, and they keep getting a bigger building, and they keep inviting more and more people. And now for last year, and this will be the 3rd year, they've built a juvenile conference around me. And it's juvenile officers from all over Louisiana. So Kevin went with me last year, and we educated at that 8-hour class for just people that work with juveniles, because Kevin has a powerful story, and in many ways, and
which his story, on the show.
His story weaves together in a way that's very unexpected. Yeah. And one trauma often leads to another trauma that perhaps you did or did not remember. So when you're in the midst of having a complete another meltdown from the current trauma that you're in, often another one is dumped in because your brain's already in such a vulnerable state. So, you know, I get to travel all over. I've had multiple international gigs, and my sheriff's department in Louisiana that I love, my sheriff said something about being a subject matter expert, and I said, oh, don't call me that. I'm not a subject matter expert. I know what that means, and that's not me.
But you are.
And he said,
you lived it.
You are a subject matter expert. So I went to my hotel room that night and I Googled subject matter expert, because I thought, that's like false advertising. You can't be calling me that. So I'm Googling in my hotel room in Thibodaux, Louisiana, subject matter expert. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm a subject matter expert. So all these years I've thought I'm nobody because I don't have these fancy letters behind my name. I'm not highly educated like psychologist and all of these doctorates and all of these people. But now I have letters behind my name. I'm an SME. And so, you know, I have judges and DAs that will be in my class, and they'll say, will you come and be an expert witness at a trial? Absolutely. Let me tell you about trauma. Yes. So I'm living this life that's like a fairy book and loving every minute of it. Do I still have bumps in the road? Absolutely. Um,
Do you also feel, can you go back and say where you're at now, if you had to change it all over to be where you are today, would you change it?
um, Gary and I often say to each other, I wish I could have met you sooner and loved you longer. And that's what I would like to change. And
Okay.
so sometimes I get a little hung up on that. And then he will say to me, and this just happened this week, he will say to me, I wish I could have met you sooner and loved you longer, but you wouldn't have had Jared, Sarah, and Lexi, and those are my kids. And he said,
Right.
I would never take that from you. I
And you
would.
wouldn't have been who you are today.
So, I wouldn't wish it on anybody,
No,
but my advice is that to anybody who's had trauma or dysfunction or whatever word you want to use, there's light. It's a hard, long journey and it takes a lot of work. If you're willing to put the work in, there's light there. And then once you worked on healing yourself, there are people that need to hear your story.
absolutely.
And that's what we do. We reach behind us and we help the next person coming up.
Do you feel that you're putting those masks on still?
Um, Not, no, no. And I tell people, yeah, this is it. Take it or leave it. This is it. That's all I got. I can't. And I tell people before I speak, this isn't going to be pretty, and I'm probably going to be offensive to you, but I'm not sugarcoating my story
Shouldn't have to. It's
because
your
that's
story.
not fair to me, and
No,
it's not fair to you. And I want you to learn from me, so I can't make it pretty and tie it up with a bow and hope that you'll learn something from it. I have to get down and dirty and raw with it and just give it to them straight up, which is another reason that I love working with law enforcement. It's because they're so non-judgmental. And if I say a cuss word, they're not offended.
right.
And I can just tell it like it is, and they're not clutching their pearls and they just roll with it. And I love that.
And
That
they're willing to learn to be better for themselves as well as the victims,
they
and to
are.
understand the side that those that are coming in to share what happened. Not, I mean, that's just even a huge step to even do that, to go into
Yes.
the police department and say, I was raped, or just when you were running away and the cops are like, oh, your dad's the best guy, blah blah blah, instead of saying, no, my dad isn't, and this is what's happening, and this is why I keep on running away.
Mhm. And I tell law enforcement, if you're working with a runaway, find out what they're running from,
Mhm.
because we're not running to something, we're
Right,
running away from something. So
right.
so ask us questions what we're running from. Maybe we'll tell you.
But as you said, they're not trained because they don't know what they don't know, and um, it was never talked about. Everything was swept underneath the carpet, and so now people are wanting to be better in whatever they're doing, and taking, and again, going and taking off their mask and saying, this is it. We need to either share our experience, our story, or assist the police or the sheriff or anybody, the first responders, the medical people, to understand that you have to get behind that person's mask to find out how you can actually help them, because they're struggling.
Yes.
And when we put on those masks, it's because it's our safe space, because
Right. And it's
know
protected.
we don't know, we don't think we're worthy, because even though people, I love you, blah blah blah, I'm here for you, but they all disappear.
Yeah, they do.
They do, because once you start sharing, I'd say 99% of those people, they're gone because they don't know what to do. Just like the questions, why didn't you tell somebody? Did you think about your husband, about when you were thinking about killing yourself? Did you think about your kids? Oh my gosh, could you just
Yeah.
listen? You don't need to ask these questions.
Yeah. And people will often ask me, Well, if your dad, not if, because your dad did those things to you, what do you think happened to him? Do you think someone harmed him? Why would he do that? And I just want to say, listen, if you rolled up on somebody that was ferociously beating a puppy, would you stop and say, I know that you're beating that puppy, but what happened to you? What in your past made you beat
No,
that puppy?
no, because you have to go onto your journey and go forward for you. Now, we were talking off air about addicts, and it's hereditary. However, people don't, if they're, addicted to drugs or alcohol or porn or whatever, they don't know at times that they're even addicted because they don't realize that it could have been from the society, their parents or whatever. But that, you don't sit there and go, well, this happened to me because my father's family was that. No, that's giving them an excuse. That's giving them like a free, you're good to
Hmm.
go. You didn't do anything. We'll
And
just deal with all the crap that
I
you put into my life.
and I can tell you for the horrificness of my life, I have never and would never harm my children ever. And if
Because
there's a cycle,
you became the mother that you wanted to have. And again, I'm not righting or wronging your mom. I don't know her or whatever, but you became, with your children, you gave them what you didn't have.
and it's so evident in the relationship that I have with them. And so,
You
you
made
know,
that choice.
and it's a choice that you make to break the cycle, and not everyone chooses or has the ability, maybe, to break that cycle. And there's lots of ways people deal with trauma, and um, you know, whether it's drugs or alcohol or porn or male addiction or whatever it is. My way was to try to be as absolutely perfect as I could be, and to be as tiny and small and invisible and quiet so that no one would notice me.
Yet you were noticed by your wonderful husband with all the flaws.
And I am so different today from the person that he married. And I will sometimes tease him and say, I don't know how you say you loved me then and you love me now. And I couldn't be any more two different people. And he'll just laugh and
The
say, yeah,
combination.
I,
Yes, one,
I,
we're all flawless. I mean, we're all broken. We're all broken. So when we sit there and feel that we have to be perfect, but where's that visual coming from? Where's that perfect? Where's the perfect? So we're always constantly trying to better ourselves over just accepting ourselves.
mhm, in so many ways and in
And look
every
how long it
aspect.
took. It doesn't happen overnight.
No, it's a long, hard road.
We're in our 60s and
It's a
we're
long,
still we're still learning I think you and we're both the same age. We're still learning every single day a, a piece about who we are that we didn't even know that was inside of us.
and their memories still come back. The funny thing, the amazing thing about your brain is that it will only give you what you can handle because it's going to protect itself.
Absolutely.
And so the more you heal, the more your brain will give you. So as you're healing and thinking, look at me, I'm doing really good. And your brain says, okay, you're well enough. I'm going to give you another
Right.
piece. And then it starts over again because now I have another piece of my story. And it doesn't always drop in a convenient place. I could be at Walgreens or a basketball game.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I have this memory that's been locked away for 50, 60 years. And I got to get somewhere safe and get somewhere grounded and try to get going through this memory. But for as horrific as they are, it's a really good sign. It's a sign that my brain is healing and I am healing. But every day is a work of, you make the decision every day to get up and be the best that I can be, whatever that means and whatever that looks like. But listen, I still have lots of days that I fall up. I travel a lot. I'm in airports a lot. And not very long ago, I was in the Atlanta airport. I've been in there dozens of times. and I got turned around and I could not get out. I couldn't find a way out. I kept going in the same circle. And I just found a corner and I put my back against the wall and I just kind of slid down and I was just setting and I called Gary and I was just bawling hysterically and I said, I'm lost, I'm lost. And he said, what, where are you? I mean, he knew geographically where I was.
Right.
And I said, I'm in the airport and I can't get my way out. And the more I panicked, the more the tapes got louder and louder. Well, that's because you're stupid and you're dumb and you shouldn't be traveling and nobody wants to hear you talk anyway. And what the hell are you thinking? You shouldn't be doing this. You should stay home. And it's just spirals. And so I had Gary on the other end of the line saying, tell me what you're looking at, as he's on his computer pulling up the layout of the Atlanta airport. No, tell me what you see. Well, I see McDonald's and I see Brighton's jewelry store and okay, do you know who you flying today? American? Because I usually always yes. Okay. Well, it looks like you're at, Terminal C, and if you'll walk to the left and like a child. And in many ways, I had to go back and find her, that child that got lost in all of this. And sometimes I feel like I resort to very childlike coping mechanisms.
But that's okay.
And I have somebody who's
You're very,
says,
you're very blessed.
you're worth it. And
Yes.
let's figure out where you're at and you're going to be just fine.
Well, we're not, and I'm going through this myself, of going through the emotions. It was always just get over it, or you're not worthy to even have these emotions, and you shouldn't cry, and you shouldn't laugh. I mean, you
Right.
shouldn't have these emotions, and you are not worthy. And so you can't get out of wherever you are or whatever, and you're stuck. But you're allowing yourself to be honest. I mean, and saying, look, I still have these triggers, and your triggers will never go away.
No, they won't.
They won't, but it's part of who you are, because now you can recognize it with other people when you're talking to them, and they feel safe to be able to lean into you and go, I got these triggers too. I have where, I don't think I'm worthy, and this is what I went through. So when we share and we have no mask, but we're okay to say, hey, I'm still that little girl, because we will always be that little girl. I'll always be that person that, was sitting on the beach and what happened to me. You'll be that little girl in the struggle and everything that you went through. But you can come back and say, but I understand because I got married, but I have 3 beautiful children. I wasn't wanting to get to meet anybody, but boom, he shows up. And both of our faith is very strong.
Yes, he was a gift from God.
God,
Complete
God,
gift.
God breaks people down to build us to be something better. And that's the whole reason why I'm all about, the mental health, because I know that feeling of, wasn't on a tile, but just, I'm done. I'm done.
Just tired.
Yeah, I'm tired. I'm done. I can't cry. I can't do anything. I'm not worthy, and nobody will miss me.
Yes.
Nobody will miss me. They'll remember me. Oh, yeah, she was a great person, and we'll just keep on talking.
Mm-hmm.
But God puts you here for you to help. And what you and Kevin are doing, it's what's needed, because it was never there before. And as you said, that one gentleman said, I go back and I think of all the other people I talk to.
Yeah, I have them tell me that a lot. You make me think of every case I worked and I totally screwed it up. But listen, that's not on law enforcement. According to the FBI, From the time an officer enters the academy until they retire at 65 or whatever retirement age is, um, the average amount of training that an officer has in sexual assault through the that encompasses their career is 2 hours.
Okay, well, luckily we've got Cash Patel, and maybe we'll just have to get you guys together.
2 hours of training.
That's ridiculous.
So Kevin and I teach an 8-hour class, and in every state I've taught in, my class has always qualified for continuing education, CEU hours, or post credit for law enforcement. And so after they sit under my class, which is a very interactive class, it is not death by PowerPoint. I can promise them that.
I can't see the two of you doing that.
Very interactive. It's just Kevin and I both have so much to say that we want to talk. We're getting ready to do a conference in California, and it's CALIA, which is it's the gold standard for law enforcement. If your PD or SO has reached CALIA certification, you've really done a lot of work and you're really, really highly respected. And it's great, and I'm thrilled to be speaking for them. The downfall is we get an hour and 15 minutes. Now, Gary says, Sherrie, you can't introduce yourself in an hour. And I really can't. So Kevin and I are both speaking, and we have an hour and 15 minutes. This should be so funny. I don't know how we've never worked together in that. I do conferences alone, and sometimes we'll have an hour, and I talk really, really fast and don't take a breath. But we're doing it together, and we have an hour and 15 minutes. I don't know. This is going to be really, really comical and really interesting. But
yeah, it'll be good. So I will, of course, put your link down. I'm going to be having Kevin on so people can get to know him and his story and everything like that. I'm working on getting you out here to Arizona.
Oh, we would love it. Oh. We'll be back in, I think, August. We'll be back at Parker.
Yeah, that's up north. But hey, I might be able to get up there now. But what would you say to somebody that you met that you didn't know anything about them, but you could tell that they were hiding behind a mask?
Funny thing about trauma victims is we sense each other. There's a kindred spirit there, and we can kind of tell. The average age for an incest survivor to tell their story is 53. 53. We hide behind guilt, shame, and humiliation until we're 53. I was 35, and I still feel like I lost a lot of my life. It's scary. It is so scary. But you are stronger than you will ever know. Yeah. And you have the power to take your life back. And you will weed a lot of people out of your life. And that I wasn't prepared for. I did not anticipate that. I didn't anticipate the majority of people leaving my life. When my marriage broke up and I came out, if that's the right word. But let God lead, and he will put you, like I would never have healed if not for Corpus Christi, Texas, because I worked 2 jobs because I loved it, but I never allowed any downtime. Because if you have downtime, then you have to think.
Yep.
So I worked 2 jobs and I stayed busy all the time. Well, I came to Corpus. We rented a little condo on the beach. We were only going to be here for 3 months. That's, by the way, been 13 years ago. God took me away from everything that I knew, everything that was familiar, and I had no choice but to either kill myself, which I tried to do, and then lean on him and say, God, I've tried this 50 ways, 5,000 ways, and I've done it wrong. Let me try it your way. And I know he must have said, finally, exactly. I have been here waiting, girl. Where have you been? And he has opened doors. You know, when I tell people I'm an international speaker, I just think that is so bizarre. I had no vocabulary, none. I didn't know how to like my eggs.
You talk from your heart. and you're talking your truth, then you're sharing that. And that's a big difference.
And I have people say, how do you stand in front of public speaking is so scary. How do you stand in front of people and bare your soul and tell your deepest, darkest secrets? Because that's where God has me.
Yep.
That's where He's placed me. And
Yep.
He continues to open. And my prayer is every day, Lord, you open the door for me and I will walk through it,
And he's doing
wherever
it.
it is.
He's
And
doing it.
He just keeps opening the doors and I just keep going.
Well, I thank you for coming on. And I am blessed to call you a friend.
Thank you.
And we've had some good
We
conversation.
have.
And um, and that's where God comes in. They take the people out that, we're deep. It's all about having the truth conversation. So I always just say to people, drop the mask when it gets very heavy. There's
It's
nothing more
exhausting.
liberating. There's nothing more liberating than being your true self, quirks and all. So
Mhm.
thank you. And I will see you in Arizona if I can do it.
I was gonna say we're gonna just put that out there and
No,
let God do the work and
I,
watch
I,
watch Him
I
work.
am. I am.
All right, tell Kevin I said hey.